And there we are. Let me know in the chat room if you can see and hear me okay. I fixed my hair. It's wild and crazy today. Thunderstorms, lightning, and electricity. I'll do my imitation of the wild professor this evening. So, okay, good, excellent. Thank you, guys. Diamond Disc Audio keeps the wheels on Patch Airlines. Thanks, Doug, for being with us this evening. We are going to change things up just a little bit. And by the way, my t-shirt says wooden boat on it. As I've mentioned before, Kathleen and I we enjoy, the whole wooden boat scene. We don't own a boat, wish we could, but anyway. This is a Viking ship. That's their symbol for Wooden Boat Magazine. What we're going to do is a little different tonight. I'm going to read, after some opening comments, I'm going to read from Covert Catastrophe, my first novel. Many of you have the PDF of Covert Catastrophe, published in 2013, as well as 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, published in 2014, the first book in 2013, so 2013, 2014. I point those dates out because the information that I'm going to read to you tonight is absolutely applicable to the present day. It is reminiscent of things we've discussed here at length for 3 years in the live streams and for 3 years within the pages of Entangled magazine. I wanted to mention that patrons have access to Entangled magazine and all of the live streams, as well as the peer-reviewed white papers, the journals, the excerpts from journals that we present to you, scientific published articles. There's an extensive archive of written information and broadcast information available to patrons that's not available to the general public. So this video, as with all of my videos, all of the live streams, they are posted to the public a day, 2 days, 3 days after their original air date. Today is Tuesday, July 14th. We've changed the schedule here for our live streams. We have replaced Wednesday with Tuesday. That's why we're here this evening. I'm going to volunteer some of my time each week to our very small little town. Only 900 people, 900 residents in our tiny little burg, as I like to call it. And so it's important that everybody gives back to the community, and we're fairly new residents, and I'm going to live up to that motto, if you will, and contribute to the community. So that necessitated a change. We will continue to broadcast on Sundays. The change is now Tuesday instead of Wednesday, and we will continue on Thursday. So 7 o'clock Eastern Time, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, every other day. Alrighty? But again, for the general public listening to this later, you have the opportunity to access 3 years of information. Not just live streams that you can find on YouTube, but they are arranged thanks to one of our patrons, Josh from Australia, who put together an outline of all of our live streams so that they're easy to go through in the archives as a patron and find the information that is of interest to you. Again, we have extensive library of articles that I've posted. I have posted within Patreon something in the neighborhood of 1,300 postings into Patreon in the last 3 years. So there's a lot there besides just the articles that we have provided as research information as we report, myself and my wife Kathleen report on behalf of the patrons. Okay? You also have access to these two novels, one of which I'm going to read an excerpt from. It's going to take probably an hour for me to read all of this particular section of the book, but it pertains to something that we have tried to present over the last couple of live streams, but just haven't found the appropriate time for it, and that's Project Bluebeam. But mentioned in this excerpt that I'm going to read is not only Project Bluebeam, but also DNA changes. And that is where I would like to lead off tonight. Just to step back a little bit, what I call touch points, going back to bring new patrons up to speed and the general public. I would like to give you from Patch Airlines, as we call it, from 40,000 feet, that larger perspective, okay? That larger perspective from a higher point of view. Regarding DNA and COVID-19 testing and COVID-19 vaccination, here's the issue. Once the vaccine is released to the world, and I maintain that it already exists, I have said that for many, many months, that the virus itself, being genetically modified, human-produced, was not released unless there was already a vaccine ready. Therefore, all of what's been going on in terms of companies competing, Operation Warp Speed for the development, as the president calls it, and we talked about Warp Speed in the last live stream on Sunday. The issue is we have pharmaceutical companies that are taking advantage of the situation by design. It's all engineered. And they are profiting handsomely by it. And I read an article today that the Defense Department just submitted to Congress a request for reimbursement for COVID-related expenses to the tune of over $50 billion with a B, $50 billion in reimbursement in additional funding, okay? Just amazing to me. So there's a lot of profiteering that is going on right now. But be that as it may, the issue is the vaccine. As I shared with you extensively on Sunday, I cited Dr. Baltimore's statement back in 2015, a Nobel laureate. We read his whole profile on Sunday. Dr. Baltimore, a Nobel laureate in biology, stated in an article, an interview that was conducted by the New York Times in 2015, that a genetically modified and genetically produced in a recombinant RNA, recombinant DNA produced vaccine. And he was specific to the family of COVID vaccines, COVID viruses, MERS coronavirus, SARS coronavirus. Coronavirus as a family, there was no COVID-19 in 2015, of course. But he was speaking specifically regarding IgT, okay? That is the gene transfer technology. That is the immunoprophylaxis gene transfer, IgT, that is employed in producing a vaccine through genetic modification. And he stated unequivocally that once the recipient is injected with a recombinant RNA DNA derived manufactured vaccine, the recipient of that vaccine, his or her own DNA is permanently is what he said, permanently changed. So I'd like to pick up from that statement that I just repeated from Sunday, and it's a repetition of what I presented many weeks ago from Dr. Baltimore. I want to pick up and go forward with that from 40,000 feet and give us sort of the big picture ramification of that. We are all familiar with genetically modified organisms, GMOs, GMO foods, Monsanto. That was setting the stage, because if we look at this from a legalistic standpoint, we look at genetic modification of humans from a legal standpoint, as has been done, because particularly in the United States, case law is developed through precedent. A precedent-setting court case produces case law. Precedent was established with Monsanto and others who developed GMO foods, such that they could be granted a patent on that food that they created through genetic modification. Now, I know a lot of you are leaping ahead already, but I'll just spell it out. This means, if you take Dr. Baltimore's statement that the recipient of the vaccine, his or her DNA will be permanently changed, that renders that human a genetically modified organism. We're talking about GMO humans here. Legally, the implication is that, one, a patent can be issued, okay, for the process. That means the producer of that vaccine can be granted a patent. That may not be a big deal to you and I. It is to the holder of the patent from a financial standpoint. But you know what else it does? Legally, it makes us the property of the patent holder. It makes us a commodity that can be sold. When we think about the mark of the beast, that no man may buy or sell without the mark of the beast, save he. Okay? Kind of puts a new twist on that whole idea of buying and selling. What's being bought and sold? Potentially, it could be the humans who have now been rendered a genetically modified organism, does it not? The property of the patent holder. I have said since 2013, when I first published Covert Catastrophe, and the now infamous video interview that has made the rounds on YouTube of myself, my very first public interview, when I was talking about the third strand of DNA. We'll hear some of that tonight in the book. It means that we are rendered as a serf class, S-E-R-F. I'm repeating myself, I know that, but I'm fitting it into this context of the patent, the GMO food. If you're a commodity, you're a slave. You are legally enslaved property. Think about the feudal system with the serf class of the society serving the masters, the king and queen and the royal court. They were indentured, enslaved property. Those that take this vaccine will be rendered that enslaved property. Plain and simple, from a legal, patented perspective. Okay? That, from 40,000 feet, puts an entirely different view on what we are talking about. Does it not? Okay? Alrighty. Just looking at my notes here. So in other words, this is transhumanism. We often have discussed and we think of transhumanism in terms of computers and humans connecting themselves by way of a brain-computer interface, a la Elon Musk and others, right? The uploading of our consciousness, our memories, the brain-computer interfaces, the nano robots within the body, the neural lace, the injection of antennas into groups of neurons in the brain using Elon Musk's latest technology. All of this we've published in Entangled magazine a year and a half ago. Okay? But transhumanism, in the discussion of genetically modified organism, for which a patent is granted and humanity becomes the enslaved serf class as a result of that. That's a different definition of transhumanism, isn't it? Okay? Timothy, I'm watching the chat room. The marked human to be bought or sold. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is another fine example of the increase in knowledge that God has talked about in the book of Revelation. Okay? And I would venture to say that there are very few sources of this information out there. Okay? This vaccine that is going through this process right now of Operation Warp Speed, they're skipping animal testing and going right to human testing. We reported that back in March. 10,000 and then 30,000 volunteers, mostly young people from the urban areas, considering it to be their service to humanity, to be guinea pigs. Well, this has never been done. This vaccine has never been used on humans. The vaccine that they're skipping over and fast tracking at warp speed, this is dangerous. I mean, bad enough, all the things we've talked about regarding vaccines over the years, this is even more dangerous. And what they will never tell, they will never disclose, there will be no transparency, is the DNA modification that is the result of a DNA-derived vaccine. This is extremely dangerous. Never been done, at least in recorded history. We have discussed also the super soldier programs coming out of DARPA. Just to give you just a little snapshot, back in 2010, DARPA starting to develop the super soldier program, at least publicly in 2010, finally acknowledging the program, was to enhance and subvert. This is coming out of DARPA's own language, out of their own voice. In 2010, they said in the super soldier program, they were going to enhance and subvert. So if you want to look up a word, look up subvert, subversion. Okay? Subvert human DNA. Back in 2010. So when I was talking about this in 2013, this was old news. And yet today, people watch that old video, that old interview of me, and are astounded and shocked that I would be talking about something that is happening right now today in 2020. Back in 2013, well, I was just revealing stuff that I had researched for many, many years that I came across back in 2010 through DARPA. So, back in 2010, let's go to microneedle arrays. We talked about Micron Corporation specifically. And again, go back into Untitled magazine. We've got all the sources and the links and the players and the names and the graphics, okay? Back in 2010, DARPA was funding the research and development for microneedle array patches with the ability, and someone asked me this question, and I hope they're listening to this, asked me this question in an email earlier today, and I wasn't able to address it, but I will right now. How is it through the microneedle array that electroporation, again, something we've discussed at length here, and let me put the graphic up. I'll switch over and show you electroporation. I still have it here. How is it that the microneedle array quantum dot delivering patch will be able to provide an electrical field, which is electroporation, an electrical field that would cause the perforation, that's what poration is, the perforation of the cellular membrane, allowing for the introduction of genes and or drugs into the cell. I'll explain it again, and again, this is in the magazine. The electroporation occurs because there's a 5G signal broadcast to that is interrogating the microneedle array. It's receiving a 5G signal. It's receiving an electrical field by way of 5G that perforates the cells. This allows the introduction of genes into the cells for the purpose of modifying the DNA of the cells. And this occurs throughout the body. Now, these are the specifics that people have sent me YouTube videos, and the YouTube videos don't go into these specifics. We try to drill down deeply. Here we're drilling into the cell itself to explain it. Not only do the microneedle arrays have an antenna, and I have shown you that graphic as well. I think I still have it here. Let me see. Not only do they have, built within the microneedle array, the antenna for 5G for receiving and sending. Remember, the quantum dot microneedle array is a biosensor, so it's transmitting data as well. Okay, let me just see if I have this real quickly. Here it is, right here. Okay, so the graphic that goes with that is right here. The helical coil within the skin of the body. This is a naturally occurring antenna system within the body that receives 5G signals that causes electroporation, but specifically to the microneedle array. Okay? There is also an antenna. And I'm trying to find it, if we have it. Maybe it's in here. No, that's a biosensor. I wasn't going to go to this extent here, but that's why I'm a little bit unprepared with the graphics. We'll get to this in a moment, so I'm just going to go ahead and put myself back up on, put this back up here. So to stay on focus, stay on point, electroporation in the microneedle array The microneedle array has its own antenna receiving and transmitting signals to function as a biosensor. It is through the receipt of this electrical stimulus that causes the perforation of the cells and allows for the distribution of the recombinant RNA and DNA that is introduced by the microneedle array. This goes back to 2010 with DARPA. This entire microneedle array discussion has its origins in DARPA. You can find it there. Go to DARPA's website. You'll find it. I've put it in the Entangled magazine several times, so it's all out there. It's all available. The brain-computer interface that I mentioned, that, just to put it into a timeline, became public knowledge back in 2012. I've included it in both of my novels, especially the second novel, 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, wherein the characters have a brain-computer interface with their own quantum computer. And there is sharing of information between the humans and the quantum computer, their benevolent version of a quantum computer. Okay? So, what I published in the books came from scientific journals, scientific papers, and right out of DARPA. Okay? It's not science fiction, it's science fact. Both of those books are science fact. So in 2012, DARPA also had a program called NextGen, N-E-X-G-E-N, Next Generation. It was a non-invasive system for reading and writing, just like your CD player writer in your computer, reading and writing data to and from a CD disc. Well, back in 2012, with NextGen, they were producing through DARPA a read-write, non-invasive brain-computer interface for the Super Soldier program. They were introducing information, data, thoughts into the soldier's mind. And it was non-invasive. Okay? And again, the microneedle array is a biosensor. That's what we're dealing with here today. Okay, so those are my notes. Another question that was posed to me was regarding the testing. We move from vaccine, we move over to the testing. And we will get to Bluebeam. I'm watching the chat room. We'll get to Bluebeam when we get into the book tonight. Here's the deal. There are predominantly two mechanisms for obtaining a sample from a human for testing purposes for COVID-19. We're familiar with the long Q-tip swab that is inserted deep into the nose, back into the sinuses, back into the oral pharyngeal area of your nose, mouth, and throat, going deep back into the tissues. That's one. Okay, so that's extracting fluids. The second is a blood test, extracting blood. None of the testing for COVID-19 involves the introduction of a substance by way of an injection or through a swab. Now, it could be through the swab that they would be introducing something foreign into the body that is on the swab, and I will agree with you there, that is conceivable, but I've not found any scientific literature in the public domain to indicate that there is a contaminant on the swab that is being introduced into the body. With that in mind, think about the drawing of a blood sample. That's pretty obvious. You can prick the finger just like in a diabetic testing situation, a blood sugar level test, or with a hypodermic needle and a syringe. There's no injection going on with the testing of any substance that I have found in any of the public literature. So I have a graphic I want to share with you. And it is this one. Please bear this in mind as you listen to what I'm going to read in a moment. But here's the blood sample, and here's the testing, here's the fluorescent signal acquisition. We are talking about quantum dots here, and we are talking about luciferase, which is then luminous under a ultraviolet excitation. In other words, we're talking about a cell phone application broadcasting a near-infrared light source onto the area where the microneedle array injection took place. This is not testing. We're talking about the vaccine application, quantum dots. Okay? When we talk about drawing a blood sample, up here at the top right hand corner, you see a blood sample is delivered onto a test strip containing quantum dots, and you see the quantum dots at the bottom here. This is not injecting quantum dots. This is providing quantum dots. Okay? Not injecting. You'll see the quantum dots here. Here we go. We'll go step by step. The blood sample is applied. Then the quantum dots are used for an assay purpose. That's a counting purpose. They are detectors. So there's immunobinding taking place here. And then we have the fluorescent signal that is acquired through a near-infrared light source, in this case an ultraviolet, in the laboratory. And the reason for the ultraviolet is to be able to look at the number of quantum dots, look at the pattern of the quantum dots, look at the color patterns of the quantum dots. Quantum dots have been used in DNA research for 20 plus years. Quantum dots are nothing new. Luciferase has been around for over 30 years. Nothing new here. Okay? So I'm just going to leave that up there while I reference some information here that I would like to briefly read to you. It's a little bit technical, but this is antibody testing, quantum dot fluorescence immunoassay. The principle: capture quantum dot fluorescence immunochromatography was used to detect COVID-19 antibodies. The T line, T1 and T2, was coated with an anti-human antibody. Okay? It's an LGG antibody, but I'll skip over that as I read through this. And anti-human antibody, LGM. So we have two antibodies, we'll call them G and M, just to be easy here. And the quality control line, C, was coated with the HIS label antibody. The specific M and G antibody in the sample was bound to the antigen labeled by the quantum dot system, the QDS, the quantum dot system microsphere, and captured by T1 and T2 antihuman G and antihuman M antibodies, respectively, to form a diantibody of both M and G, the antibody quantum dot immunosandwich complex. The redundant QDS antigen conjugates are captured by the HIS label antibodies in the C line region. The red fluorescence signal is produced by the quantum dot microspheres, fixed to the T1, T2, and C lines under ultraviolet excitation. Now, I know that may be unnecessary to read all of that, but with that understanding, I want to read you this. This is from the same paper describing COVID-19 rapid test kit. Need to get to the right section here. Give me a moment. I think they have it in here. Okay. Here it is here. Sometimes it's hard to find it again in some of these things that are a little technical. Antibody testing application. I'm going to read one short paragraph. The double antibody test is stable. Both fingertip blood and venous blood, so that means they would inject a hypodermic needle and syringe into a vein, and venous blood can be tested immediately. And all positive and negative test results are 100% consistent in the corresponding blood samples. At the same time, the comparison of fingertip blood with venous whole blood and venous plasma shows that the coincidence rate between fingertip blood and venous blood is 100%. So they can draw blood from your fingertip or from a vein. It doesn't make any difference. The test results are still the same. The point here that I'm really trying to drive home is that there is no injection involved in testing. I'm reading it right from the source, specific to COVID-19. Okay, this is the latest. No injection is taking place in the testing process. And we can consider the swab, as I said, but specifically when we're talking about the taking of a blood sample, there's no injection going on. So the question that was posed to me about the testing was this: should we subject ourselves, allow ourselves to be tested? I obviously have emphatically said no, we should not allow ourselves to be tested. Is that because there's some kind of an injection taking place? No. Is that because I have some concern about the swab being contaminated? Partly, but I don't have any evidence to show that that's the case. I view the testing as a violation. Okay? I view this as a violation of our bodies because they are taking from our bodies. I view it as a violation of the Bill of Rights here in the United States, a violation of our constitutional rights, and a violation of our inalienable rights granted to us by our Creator, God Himself in heaven. No one has the right to take anything from our body. And this goes to Matthew 10:28. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Okay? They might be able to kill the body. Yeah, we have some concern about that. But the Lord's telling us, do not be afraid of those that can kill the body. But they don't have the ability to kill the soul. So don't be afraid of them. Instead, fear the one, that's Satan. Fear the one who can destroy both the soul and the body in hell. That's the result of taking the mark of the beast. That's the result of taking this recombinant RNA DNA vaccine that is skipping animal trials, going right to human testing, being fast-tracked under Operation Warp Speed. Okay? They're pushing this because Satan's trying to do an end run on God's timing. Satan thinks he can move beyond, outside of God's plan. That's the nature of his hubris. He can't help himself. So he thinks he's accelerating things at warp speed, trying to beat out God and God's plan, but it's never going to happen that way. It's all under God's plan. What Satan fails to understand is that he is a tool of God. He's the tool of judgment by way of God. God created Satan. He's a hammer. He's a sickle. He's a sword. Okay? Nothing more. He's an instrument of judgment in the hand of God. So he cannot, it's like trying to claim that because you were made by the potter that you're greater than the potter, right? Okay, it's ridiculous. We as humans should only fear God in terms of honoring him as our Father, as we respect our own earthly fathers. We should be in fear of the destruction of our soul as well as our body in hell for all eternity should we take the mark of the beast. So, just to reiterate, I will refuse to the point of death being tested. Likewise, I will refuse to the point of death, and I mean including death. Death because I refuse the test, or death because I refuse the vaccine. It will not affect my soul, but if I do willingly take the vaccine, the mark of the beast, then it destroys my soul and my body. Matthew 10:28. Okay? So the question that was posed to me by email was regarding testing. And I think I've answered that. I would recommend refusing the testing, not because it's introducing something into the body. Okay? There are no quantum dots. There's no Luciferase or other substances being introduced into the body by any mechanism that I can find in the public domain, in the literature, about COVID-19 testing that demonstrates something is being delivered into the body. So I hope that answers that question. Okay? And I know, Colleen, you're in the chat room, and you were the one who had asked me that question just before we went on the air. And if I've not answered it extensively enough, please email me again and we can talk about it privately by email. Okay? You're welcome. You're welcome, Colleen. So this is how it works. General public who's listening to this, after the live broadcast, I try to be very responsive, whether it's in chat, which I can't always watch, but I'm trying to tonight until I begin to read from my own novel. But I certainly make a great effort in the emails to respond to questions, especially questions from patrons. Patrons get first priority. If you're just in the general public and you're sending me by way of my contact tab at anthonypatch.com on my homepage a question, if I have time, I'll answer a question to the general public, and I do that frequently. It's not like I'm trying to say I don't. It's just the priority goes to the patrons, okay? And that's only fair. Okay, so again, bottom line, testing, nothing's going into the body. If someone can demonstrate by way of public information from a valid scientific source, preferably a scientific journal, a peer-reviewed white paper, a patent, to me, those are bona fide sources. If you can produce that source of information, that type of evidence, I would be happy to take that and receive it at anthonypatch.com through my contact tab and review that and then present it in a future live stream. But I have not found anything to make me even want to say that anything's being introduced. Even the swabbing, though it may be contaminated, I'll grant you that, I find no evidence anything's going into the body in testing for COVID-19. But again, based on a moral principle, I will not acquiesce to any testing for COVID-19. Okay? All right, so here we go. We want to go to our book for the evening. Just one moment before we get to that. I hear my wife asking me a question. Yes, open the door. Sorry, guys. Hang on.
Before you move on to the next thing.
Yep.
Can you address something? Rudolph is in the chat room, and he's questioning about, how do we know for sure that this microneedle array is the actual mark of the beast? And it's a good question. I encouraged him by saying, it's good that you question, I said, I know, to me and Anthony, we know based upon how God led us in our research and all of the scientific data that has supported this, following all of what we've been studying and presenting, and the confirmations along the way through just the world, the secular, white papers that we've been reading, secular scientific, and
I'll go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the question is, in case people couldn't hear my wife who was standing at the door, how can we be so sure that the microneedle array is the actual mechanism by which the mark of the beast will be delivered? Is to paraphrase the question. I would put it this way. Since the time that Kathleen and I first went public with this information, both in Entangled magazine and in our live streams, and this goes back to at least March of this year, maybe earlier, but at least March when we first broke this information, okay? And let me just double check something here. Okay. Can you guys in the chat room, I have to refresh my screen. Just give me a moment here. For some reason, my screen's frozen. Okay. I have to refresh my screen. Just give me a moment here. Sorry about the echo. There we go. Turn that other speaker down. Okay, here we go. So let's say that since March we have been publishing and speaking about this microneedle array. Technologically, from a technical standpoint, scientific standpoint, it fits the bill. It has the ability to, number one, introduce DNA into the body. RNA, recombinant RNA and DNA by way of microneedles. This is a system by which they've been delivering not only DNA, but pharmaceuticals for over 15 years now. Okay? Pharmaceutical agents to patients. The ability to embed quantum dots is a foregone conclusion in the scientific papers. and that includes the markers of Luciferase. The ability to have an antenna embedded into the patch I shared with you, I've shared the graphic in the past. Again, it's in Entangled magazine. The picture of the antenna in the needle, right from the scientific sources for the 5G biosensor wireless connection feature. The other feature of the microneedle array is that it does not, unlike a vaccine delivered by even a single dose, disposable, GPS equipped, RFID equipped syringe. They're not injecting an RFID chip, it's on the syringe. Okay. That delivery mechanism of a vaccine requires the vaccine to be refrigerated. It must be kept within a certain temperature range. That's known as the cold chain, cold supply chain. Not required with the microneedle array. In fact, patients for years have received microneedle arrays through the mail. Okay? They can go to their local pharmacy with prescription and pick it up. So when we look at it from 40,000 feet and we look at the logistics involved, when the president talks about 300,000 doses of the vaccine, 300 million doses just for the United States of the vaccine. The logistics of delivering that by way of a syringe and a needle can't be done. Not in the time frame that they want. Can't be done. But it can be done through a microneedle array distribution system. They can mail it to you. Okay? They can FedEx it. They can Amazon it. Okay? So from a simple logistics to a scientific components and mechanism to a pharmacological, from a quantum and nanoscale basis, from the delivery of RNA and DNA to electroporation with the antenna from 5G to perforate the cells and deliver the RNA, DNA into the body and permanently change the DNA. The only thing that fits the bill is the microneedle array patch. Okay, so that's a quick summary. All the details are in Entangled magazine. That's why we publish it. Thank you for the question, Rudolph. It gives me that opportunity to do a real quick summation, a soundbite on the microneedle array. Okay? There has been a question in the last couple of days about hydrogel, and I'm going to go ahead and address hydrogel. Hydrogel is a component of the microneedle array. Okay? The only purpose of the hydrogel is as call it a transport or suspension medium. Hydrogel is inert. It's designed. Graphene hydrogels are inert. Graphene has the ability, in some applications, in some formulations, to be a conductor of electrons. Graphene is a good conductor of electrons. Okay? Graphene is made of carbons, C60 carbon, Buckminster fullerene, Bucky arrays, the soccer ball arrangements. Okay? But hydrogel itself is inert and is almost as light as air. It was developed by NASA. It was developed as a thermal barrier material that would be ultra light. It's mostly air. And as you know from, if you put insulation in a building and you have different R ratings, like R10, R13, R30, it's because it's trapping more air. Okay? Higher the R rating, the more air that is trapped in the insulation. It's the air that provides the insulation factor, not the material itself. In the case of home insulation, Typically it's fiberglass, okay? Or foam board, expanded foam board. Air is a very good insulator. And the more you can trap air, the better the insulation factor. This is what hydrogel does. It's inert. You can use hydrogel to carry quantum dots, but hydrogel itself doesn't self-replicate. It doesn't pose any harm to the body. It's inert. Graphene is used in the body all the time. Okay? So I wouldn't be concerned about hydrogel itself. It's the RNA, DNA, the recombinant RNA and DNA that's going into the body that's the real issue. Okay? That's the real focus. Alrighty? So, again, just answering questions that have come to me by emails, and always happy to try to cover those questions. Okay. And clear my tabs out here so that we can get into doing a little bit of reading. So if you have a cup of coffee, hopefully it is Entangled coffee, available at anthonypatch.com. We have our own coffee. We sell it at cost, just like the magazines on Amazon. They're sold at cost. Okay? Entangled, if you want to subscribe, outside of being a patron, if you want to subscribe, it's $30 a year. Published every month, and you get all the back issues all the way back to when we started in June of 2017. It's amazing. Tons and tons and tons of research in there. Okay, this is Covert Catastrophe, published in 2013, chapter 88, and my chapters are very short. I'm sure those of you that have read it have kind of scratched your head wondering, boy, why is this chapter only half a page long? Because we're moving quickly. It's written more like a screenplay than a novel, okay? Let me just tell you that from the formatting of this story. It's really written to be readily adaptable as a screenplay. That was my intent. We start off with chapter 88 in the PDF. That's page 249 of 331 pages. Now, I'm not a dramatic reader, so I hope this isn't too bland for you, but we'll do the best we can. This chapter 88 is entitled The Gathering. Thank you for coming. He's awake now, breathing on his own. The doctor is removing his tubes, her mom kissing him on the cheek. Great news. Hank is coming up from parking the car. I couldn't wait. Now hugging her. Yes, Dr. Mitten continuing. There does not appear to be any neurological deficits, but we'll need to run more tests and another CAT scan or two. I'd like to keep him here for at least 2 more days, 3 at the most. 3 days, Laura trying to keep it under control. Let the doctor speak, Laura. He knows best, his mother's hand on one shoulder near the foot of the bed. Jim, blink twice if you understand. I'm removing the ventilator. Are you comfortable breathing on your own? Jim blinking twice, Laura restraining herself from speaking. Excellent. His eyes moving from the doctor's upward, becoming focused on the television mounted high upon the wall in the corner of his room, silently displaying its images. What? Laura, noticing his line of sight, leans over the end of the bed to obtain a better view of the screen. Mom, her voice dropping off. Dr. Minton, sensing the urgency in her voice, turns towards the screen while at the same time grasping for the television's bedside remote control. What in the world? Laura's mom exclaims, her right hand going to her lips. Dr. Minton holding down the volume button as if applying direct pressure to a bleeding wound is speechless. George, moving around, examines the single image filling the screen. Cries of fear and panic becoming evident, spreading up and down the hallways of the hospital. A crash of stainless steel dumping from a cart not far from the room. Jim, no! Laura screaming across the bed. Dr. Minton, his attention broken from the screen, turns back to his patient, who by now is sitting up in bed attempting to withdraw the endotracheal tube from his own trachea. Its restraining balloon inflated, still beneath his vocal cords. No, hold still. I'll deflate the cuff. Jesus, Jim. Dr. Minton holding Jim right down against his lips. A nurse moving in to assist. Holding Jim upright in the bed, she engages the electric motor, raising it. Jim's eyes not moving from the television, his left hand pointing at it as the news anchor continues his reporting. We still have no word from the government, the military, or anyone. No one seems to know what to make of this enormous object. Some calling it, hell, I'm calling it a spaceship. This is no UFO. I'm identifying it. Appearing minutes ago, covering the entire bay here in San Francisco, just after the president's State of the Union speech delivered in front of the Transamerica Pyramid Building. Attaching a 10cc syringe to the port, Dr. Minton withdraws its plunger, extracting the small amount of air in the cuff attached to the end of Jim's breathing tube. Smoothly withdrawing the clear, flexible plastic tube, Jim lets out a deep breath. Not coughing hoarsely. Real. Jim reaching for a bottle of water on the side table, catching his breath, his head feeling like it would explode with each word. What? Don't talk, Laura moving the nurse aside to assist Jim. Drink. The reporter continuing. We've not seen any activity, no movement. It appears to be hovering as if waiting for something. Perhaps a signal of some sort, maybe from us. Hell, I don't have a clue. I'm sorry, folks, not very professional of me, but I think I echo your thoughts. This is nuts, like something out of Hollywood. More like War of the Worlds, Hank joining them. Heard it on the car radio. People outside are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Dad, Laura waving him to the bedside, hugging him with her left arm around his waist. You're going to be okay. Go slow now, Dr. Minton, helping him to sit further upright. You still have a significant head wound. 4 days ago, you underwent surgery to remove bullet fragments from the left side of your brain. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been told the president, the reporter being cut off as the screen is split, displaying on the left the president and to the right the spacecraft. Hank cautioning, let's all keep quiet now, motioning downward with his left hand. The hallways outside their room, now silent. My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, I am here representing you to our ancestors, our forefathers and mothers, our founders from which sprang our seed. They come bringing peace and safety to our planet. Not real. Jim's voice barely audible over the television. Dr. Minton and Laura leaning close to him. What do you mean? The doctor asks. Hologram, Jim pointing up toward the television. A projection, the doctor continues. A slight weakened nod. Clouds, chemicals, Bluebeam, synchrotron, Berkeley, HARP. Jim losing consciousness. Jim, Laura yells. Flat, Dr. Minton orders Laura, who fumbles with the bed's control. Seeing this, briskly moving her aside, the nurse takes over. Don't raise his legs. Everyone, please step back. The room goes silent, save for the sounds of the president's address to the world. I shall be the first, representing our one world. Turn that off, Dr. Minton barks to no one in particular. He's more important. Everyone moves to the hallway, allowing 2 additional ICU nurses to join the doctor and nurse. Get me an OR and a CAT scan stat, one of the entering nurses automatically grabbing the wall phone, punching in the 3 numbers. Several minutes later, Jim is placed unconscious in the scanner, imaged and moved off to an operating room. Meanwhile, Laura, her mother and father, and George have gathered in a waiting area. Chapter 89, Revelation. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but we do need to pay some attention to the outside world, George beginning. It'll take our minds off things, Hank, Laura's father, offering. Laura and her mother silently consoling one another. Nurse, did you catch what the president said? George stopping a young woman moving down the hall. I've been busy, but he said something about that spaceship being only the first one. I must go, as she hurries off. These are real pros around here. A spaceship shows up, and she and the doctor keep working, Hank looking at the busy hallways. George, retrieving the remote control from behind the nurse's station, turns up the volume. To recap, the president is preparing to receive the occupants of this spacecraft. We don't know if it's occupied by aliens from another world or humans from another country. What I can tell you, our audience, is this. News services from around the world are reporting that this is the only craft, this one here, hovering silently over the San Francisco Bay. Intelligence services have confirmed this to us, and that it will be the only one for an unspecified amount of time. We now take you back to the president. This should be interesting, Hank in his obviously sarcastic tone, as a small knot of patient visitors gather about them. My fellow citizens of this one world, no need to be afraid. Our ancestors have returned to us. 11 years ago, their diplomatic mission was scheduled to meet with us in San Francisco, the founding site of our United Nations. As President of the United States, I've extended a greeting for all mankind. A welcoming ceremony is scheduled to begin 24 hours from now. I want to remind everyone, these are our ancestors, and they come in the name of peace and safety. Thank you. What do you make of that, George? Hank moving him away from the television, the space being filled in by the visitors and from Laura and her mother. Why ask me? George amused. You're the only physicist around here, Hank making sure they cannot be overheard. Retired, remember? Bull. You've done more research since leaving Berkeley than you ever did on the Hill. Fair enough. I don't know how Jim knew. All of this has been well beyond top secret for many years, George moving them to the end of the hallway beneath an open window, which he then closes. And I do wish his dad were here, but that stroke last night may prove fatal. As you know, he's been a good friend, longer in fact than you and I. This is something he swore to me to keep secret until the right time. Now is. If you think you should, Hank observing the crowd of people watching the news broadcast. Jim is my son, George's voice low and flat, nearly emotionless. No way, Hank doing his best to keep his voice down, turning toward the window. Yes, you never once hinted all these years, and now Laura's engaged to him. How? Hank looking over at George. I promised. If it helps, we were planning on revealing our secret once a wedding date had been set. George placing a hand atop Hank's shoulder. Mary and I were too old to raise him, neither of us expecting to live this long. His dad actually delivered him. I've been right with Jim his entire life. Is that why he was encouraged to accept the swimming scholarship to Berkeley? Because you were there? Hank whispering. Yes, I know it sounds selfish, but there were many more factors involved in that decision between his dad and me. This is why I'm telling you now, George, serious. I don't know how much longer I have to live, and I'd appreciate it if you would take over for us. Is he that much to handle? Hank finally breaking the tension. Yes, George extending his handshake, Hank gladly accepting. Looks like I've gained more than a son-in-law. Afraid so, my friend. By the way, George standing face to face with Hank, Jim doesn't know, but he will soon, very soon. Now back to the world at large. What has been above top secret up on the hill at Berkeley, in a nutshell, is this. The scientific community at large is an unwitting pawn to a much larger agenda, bigger than mankind's puny political battles for control on this planet. And no, just to put it out there early on, there are no aliens from other planets. Jim, and again, I have no way of knowing how he knew for certain, but that ship is, in point of fact, a holographic projection. The projector, so to speak, is from my old lab up on the hill. The Advanced Light Source building, the synchrotron machine, a particle accelerator is creating that hologram by projecting the image upon our atmosphere. That is one of many reasons they've been spraying our atmosphere all these years. Soon, I expect following this supposed meeting, they'll be providing full disclosure, as they're calling it. And with it, more images will begin appearing all around our planet. Wherever there is a synchrotron unit, George catching his breath. Hank, having turned to watch the hallway, asks, who's meeting the delegates then? For now, hybrids. They look and act just like us, for in fact they are created from our own DNA. You're kidding, Hank turning, making sure George was not somehow trying to pull his leg in the midst of all that was happening. No, and I'll keep this short and simple. Remember, I'm just a retired businessman, or as the biology whiz. For years now, research has gone into unlocking the secrets to achieving immortality, something mankind has always sought. There is a push towards this through what is being called transhumanism, part man, part machine, and their goal of achieving a singularity, a complete merging of mind with machine. George pulling up a chair. Joining him, Hank asks, what about our souls? Science tends to overlook it. It can't be measured. Idiots. It figures they'd overlook that, Hank shaking his head. Chapter 90, Scientists. Very few scientists, even the brightest, have a wide field of view. Some by default, but most choosing to bury their heads in their field of research, never comprehending how they and their work fits into the lessons of history. They may, in fact, be certified geniuses, but only in one area. They are poorly educated and lacking basic skills in most other scientific disciplines. And as Jim would say, they don't have any street smarts. You mean they don't understand the nature of man? Hank shaking his head. They're oblivious to how they've been manipulated and deceived by their handlers, George showing his anger. You mean the ones handing out the money, grants and such? Hank showing his business disdain for those not being active in the generation of revenue. It's more than about money. This is pure evil at work here, George looking his longtime friend straight in the eyes. Agreed. In my own ways, I've known this for quite some time now. This only confirms it for me. So, there is more at play here. These hybrids are created by the merging of a third strand of DNA. This is why they will not appear to have any technological devices, such as implants, on their bodies. It's all internal. George watching the hallways. Initially, prototypical third strands were fabricated using silicon and programmed the same as a computer. The programming was embedded within this new third strand, it controlling the original two and causing a cascading effect of changes within them. George stopping. Sorry, I'll back down I'll back it down a bit. I'm following, but nearing the edge, Hank shaking his head. Now, the silicon is still present in the third strand, but it is no longer programmed. Its programming is not resident. It does not actually exist in the strand, George taking a deep breath. Where is it? Outside the DNA, therefore outside the hybrid. They are being controlled, much like a drone aircraft, by an electromagnetic link. Radio controlled, if you like. As long as the link remains intact, they're functional. They are tapping into the right temporal junction within the human brain. A type of thought recognition software is employed to modify things such as morals. Linked to a computer, is that what you're saying? Hank having to get to his feet. Chapter 91, Quantum. Yes, but not just any computer. One bordering upon its own form of artificial intelligence. George choosing to remain seated. Okay, now you're moving into an area I do understand. Hank pacing in front of George. What a day. Go on. This computer uses what is known as quantum adiabatic ground state dragging and is programmed and controlled using quantum annealing. You mean the fabled holy grail for achieving artificial intelligence using the so-called quantum computer? Hank right with George. Yes and no. Yes, a quantum computer, but not using the current gate model of processing on silicon-based chips. No transistors this time, George enjoying where this is headed. What model then? Adiabatic, meaning no exchange of heat. This baby is using superconductivity, which has been used in many applications, but not in this fashion. They isolate a new type of chip. They call it a qubit. It's comprised of niobium and brought down to almost absolute zero, colder than anywhere in the universe, the lowest energy configuration. Then isolate it from all outside sources of electromagnetism to prevent interference or noise. They put a multi-layered insulated box around the supercooled container in which the qubits reside. That is, then placed in a 10 square meter shielded room, thus placing the qubits in a cold and quiet environment. By decreasing the noise, you achieve growth in computational power. How fast? Hank's mind racing ahead. As fast as the Tianyi 2 in China at 30.65 petaflops. They've not been matched up per se, but the last time that was done was against an Anton computer, which provided a solution in 30 minutes' time. Compared to this new quantum computer, which completed it in less than half a second. George pausing for effect. I know there's more, Hank laughing now. Yes, as a side note, the superconducting magnets, as I said, are made of niobium and titanium. The very same is used as magnets for the Large Hadron Collider. The name is derived from a mythical Greek entity named Niobe. She was used in Homer's Iliad, where he highlighted her proud hubris. George watching for his friend's reaction. That's the same attitude these scientists and their government handlers have. How funny, in a sick sort of way, Hank only half smiling at their inside joke. How fast? So far as I know, 2 machines to date have been sold. The first was 128 qubits, then the second a 512. That's where it pulled even with the Tianyi 2. In 12 months, the third will be a 2048, faster than if all the world's processors could be combined. 12 months later, it'll be 8192, faster than all the human minds joined together, or so they say. For what purpose, other than controlling drone hybrids? Hank keeping up, but a growing sense of dread spreading through him, markedly raising his body temperature. Each is specifically built for a field of study. Most of the current and fastest gate model computers are focused upon protein folding, thus the hybrids. And I'm confident one of the adiabatic machines will continue this work toward the goal of achieving actual neural networks, an artificial brain. That will be the 2048 model. The 512 will be used for facial and vehicle and object recognition. At least that's the public disclosure. Examples of combinatorial optimization problems are genome sequencing analysis. The protein folding I mentioned, which for the sake of our conversation, is the actual programming and control mechanism within the DNA, especially as it's applied to the new third strand. And another computer for risk analysis, which covers everything from fighting wars to betting in the world's stock markets. And again, artificial intelligence is their next step and goal, George pausing. Chapter 92, Generation 2. By the way, the silicon-based third-strand DNA in these hybrids is soon to be replaced by a Generation 2 hybrid. Starting from scratch, you might say, with the folding of newly created proteins instead. That will result in the growing of custom-designed neural networks in the new brain. Again, all controlled by the adiabatic quantum computer, which will soon be faster than a human brain, which theoretically can process at 36.8 petaflops. How will they control these hybrids? Resident programming? Hank excusing himself before George can answer, moving to a water dispenser. You okay? Laura asks her father as he's passing by the television. Just need some water is all. Laura, not buying it, approaches George. What has my father so upset? The future. I won't hide anything from you or your mother, but please, for now, allow me to finish speaking with Hank, okay? You're scaring me, Laura moving in close. Depends on how you look at things. I'm not, George smiling, taking her by the hand. For now, you focus upon taking care of your mother and Jim, okay? Okay, but I want to know everything. I'm a big girl, you know. Squeezing, then releasing George's hand as her father approaches once again down the hallway. You've seen enough of that for now, Hank stopping next to Laura and his wife. Please, go to the cafeteria and get something to eat. George and I will be along shortly. The nurse updating me, it's going to be a few more hours before Jim is moved to recovery. And Laura remaining in place. No sweat, he'll be great, you'll see, Hank hugging her. Now go, both of you. Feeling better? George noting the color having returned to his face. Yes, but let's follow the ladies to the cafeteria. In a moment. What I have to tell you is not for public consumption, George cautioning. You really are James Bond, Hank attempting to break things up, mostly for his own nerves. Funny, no, that young man in the OR is. Now look, George making sure the hallway near them was empty. This quantum computer network will be used to control everyone, everywhere, all the time. It will be done using electromagnetic waves. Like the airborne drones, Hank keeping his voice low as he finishes his third cup of water. Yes, but obviously on a much more sophisticated basis. The neural pathways of both humans and hybrids will be accessed using energy pulses. These will be broadcast not only by satellites, but from ground-based transmitters for backup and redundancy. How can they control humans? I mean, I think I can buy the whole third strand of DNA process, but regular people won't have an extra strand. Very soon they will. And they can thank their ancestors from the stars for that, George rising from his chair. and they will demand it. Why? Because they will believe the lie. You and I share the same views, and we know the governments are moving toward a single governing body, and it's not the UN. George moving Hank back toward the television, the small group having left. Yep, not much we can do about that. Too far along, I'm afraid. Hank watching the silenced news broadcast, still displaying the holographic spacecraft on one side of the screen. Perhaps. Getting back to answering your question, people will be told that a new internet has been provided by our new arrivals, along with new computers. In order to correct the economic and environmental problems of the world, everyone must use this new internet. All other gate-modeled computers will be banned and destroyed. Won't that take a long time to implement? I mean, our current net took years to develop and deploy. It already exists. It's called the ESNet 4, soon to be the ESNet 5. Like the original internet, it too was built by the military. It connects all the major research labs and universities around the planet. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Program Agency, initiated it. It too is designed for the continuity of government. Only this time, a single one. You're not making me feel any better. This all sounds like science fiction becoming fact. Hank turning his attention from the television. You're not going to tell the girls, are you? That is a decision for you to make, but I should tell you, Laura wants to know. She is a tough one, perhaps stronger than her dear old dad. Hank beginning to tear up. We can talk about how I view this whole situation later. We should join them and eat something, but quickly, one last piece of this large puzzle, and yes, there is a lot more I could tell you. Keep it simple. Okay, George laughing. There is a new virus spreading from the Middle East, and so far it's spread only to parts of Europe. It's called the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus, or MERS-CoV, and there's no known cure. Crap, George, you're really full of good news. Hank taking a seat in the small waiting area. When does it all end? Very good question, and I'm sorry. I'm not trying to scare you, but we've always been able to level with each other. But you've never hinted at any of this before. Why now? Hank visibly shaken. George slowly pointing up toward the television. Because the great and grand deception is being rolled out like a red carpet at a Hollywood premiere. The powers that be no longer have to hide their plans. Everything is in place. All except the quantum computers. You said they've only sold 2 so far, right? Sold is correct, but undoubtedly they've built many more of the newer 2048 models. These guys have been working in the shadows for years. Anything released to the public is old news. And the ESNet 4 is now in place, you said. Well, for several years now. The 5 will be online soon. And it too is based upon quantum physics. You'd be correct in saying they're a matched set. George both amused by his friend and serious about the message he's conveying. Think of it as similar in layout as the network in your old offices. Quantum computers located throughout the world, connected to one another through a central quantum computer, a hub and router on steroids. And like the first generation internet, it really does not require a hub, as any of them can take on that function. And there are no servers as such. Okay, getting back to this virus, what's up with that? Why bring it up? Hank trying to get comfortable in his chair, but without much success. Chapter 93, Parahuman. It's a product of genetic manipulation. The public is being told there is no known cure. at least for now. I anticipate an announcement shortly after these hybrid delegates meet here in San Francisco. It will be billed as their first miracle of sorts in preventing a worldwide pandemic. So they create the problem, hype it up to scare the crap out of everyone, then present the solution. Clever bastards, Hank's voice trailing off in anger. Yes, this is why people will demand what the new one world government otherwise wants to mandate anyway. What's in the vaccine? Hank giving George a strong look of suspicion. Perfect question, my friend. Very astute of you. George appreciating the moment. The latest custom protein-folded third strand of DNA. They change DNA by changing how a polypeptide folds into its characteristic three-dimensional structure. These are designer proteins. I was afraid you were going to say that, Hank rising to his feet, suddenly feeling better. I'm glad you've told me all this. At least now I know where we stand. Thank you, really, Hank shaking George's hand. Good, let's get something to eat. But there is more. So you said, so you said. The two men moving past the ICU nurse's station. Jim is known as a paramedic, right? George's tone changing. Right. Well, I dislike the term hybrid. I think parahuman is more accurate. George stopping Hank in the hallway, ensuring no one is nearby. There is so much more to this. I wish there was time. People from all walks of life in every country for years now have been subjected to programming, most completely unaware, and the numbers are staggering. So many, in fact, I didn't believe it possible. The logistics and costs alone are immense. But you'll need to trust me on this. George, I always have, Hank whispering. You've heard of the many abductions taking place. Those are only the people who know they've been abducted and subjected to brutalities I won't go into right now. I've learned from my close friends in science, who see things as you and I do, that millions have been. George watching both ends of the hallway. Coming from anyone else, I wouldn't believe it. Go on. People undergoing these programming routines have had sub-personalities embedded beneath their primary, dominant ones. Once completed, they actually believe and insist upon calling themselves the chosen ones. George once again stopping to catch his breath. For what? To be activated. They now want to be called into action. They are ready and waiting. George allowing for a nurse to move past them, leaving the area empty. To bring in this new one-world government, to reduce the population to 500 million hybrids, first, second, and third generation slaves, and to bring about a common system of belief. And a one-world leader, I suppose, Hank's demeanor grim. Yes, you can have only one in a hive. They are being programmed, along with scientists who are working for the powers that be, in achieving full spectrum dominance in all fields. And thus total power, immortality. George moving Hank further along the hallway towards the cafeteria. And they actually believe in all this immortality stuff. The elite and the broader scientific community enabling them have for generations believed the lie. They've been deceived, George emphatic. How about these millions who've been programmed? They have no choice. That has been removed from their consciousness, literally by altering their neural pathways. They've been given a prime directive. Upon full activation using the new adiabatic quantum computers and now the latest generation ESNet 5 internet system, they will be the only ones able to live in the new atmosphere being geoengineered as we speak. They will kill everyone else. What's the big picture here, George? Hank being deliberate. Using these new adiabatic quantum computers, they do calculations in a multiverse and extract information from there. They've harnessed a whole new resource of nature. George already having pulled Hank into another small waiting area. They've tapped into the fabric of the universe, into something altogether else. Their performance projections for these computers have far surpassed even their best case scenarios. Their calculated yields have been shown to suck in through these other universes or dimensions more energy, thus gaining what is called zero-point energy. And, George looking around them, actually they really don't have a handle on controlling these energies. Okay, that's going to take more explanation, and I know we don't have time for it now, but it is staggering what all of it I understand. Hank coughing from a dry throat. Let's get some water and a sandwich. Both on the move again through the hospital. Technologically, they're accessing these parallel universes, something humans have not until now been able to do. Hank stopping George as they enter the empty elevator. The bigger picture? Total transformation of both the planet and who lives on it. Oh, is that all? Hank smiling sarcastically for his lifelong friend as the elevator begins its descent. All right, let's take a pause. We have about 20 minutes. Would you guys in the chat room like me to continue reading, or would you like to pose some questions at this point? I'm open to whatever you'd like to do. Okay? Let me get a drink of water, kind of like Hank did in the story. I hear somebody coming through the door. Oh, I guess not. Okay. Yep.
You were going to talk about Project Bluebeam and holograms for Lynette.
Right. Okay, so let me do that. I'll go ahead and, because Lynette has patiently waited for a further explanation about Project Bluebeam, I'll go ahead and bring that up. So in the storyline, I have the particle accelerator providing the Bluebeam, the holographic image. Project Bluebeam, in short, is meant to project images on the atmosphere that has been heavily laden, in particular with aluminum, which of course is reflective. There are other heavy elements that are in the aerosolized spraying of chemtrails. There's desiccated red blood cells, a whole host of things. But the atmosphere, as I put in the book, as one of the applications of chemtrails, is meant to be a projection screen. Three-dimensional holographic images, not necessarily of spaceships, that's for the story, although there could be UFOs, spaceships that will be presented. But the classic storyline regarding Project Bluebeam has been to project religious images, images of a savior over geographic concentrations of believers. So over a predominantly Christian area, okay, you would have Jesus coming back in the clouds. You would have Buddha. You would have Maitreya. Some people believe that's the Antichrist, okay? So it is the projection of the Messiah, according to whatever religion. That's the storyline, okay? The Project Bluebeam, I think, serves a larger purpose than simply showing the arrival of a Messiah image in the clouds. Certainly that could be a false rapture, as some people have described Project Bluebeam. And it very well could be. Project Bluebeam could be utilized by the beast to perform signs and wonders in the heavens, to call down fire from the heavens. Could be a 3D holographic projection. The image of the beast himself, I published 2 years ago, could be projected as a solid holographic 3D image within a temple. And in this case, in an inner room within a temple that is a sphere. And I shared the scientific articles regarding projecting a 3D holographic image inside of a sphere, inside of a globe. And because it's reflecting, because this is a discrete laser beam, that's what a hologram is made up of, a focused stream of photons that are split in two, one stream of photons striking a physical object, and the other stream striking one or more mirrors. It is the mirror image that we see as that translucent, think of Princess Leia as the hologram in Star Wars. Okay, so that translucent figure is the figure that the mirror produces of the original that the other part of the beam is actually focused on. Okay? In the case of my conjecture about the image of the beast being projected within the temple, it's within a globe, within a sphere, which the inner surface is all mirrors. And again, I provide in Entangled magazine the article, the scientific article, that describes that spherical projection that then results in a tangible, solid, touchable, interactable, solid 3D hologram within the temple, within the new Holy of Holies, the abomination of desolation. Okay? Now, Project Bluebeam is projecting a holographic image or multiple images onto the atmosphere. It is meant for deceiving and fooling the masses who don't know any better. So, Andy is asking a question, is the aluminum sprayed, does it get brought down by the rain? Yes, there. Dane Wigington, who's been a guest here on our live streams twice, and who Doug Diamond has as a client with geoengineering. If you go to geoengineering.org, that's Dane Wigington's site, and he has done independent laboratory testing, has sent samples, soil samples and water samples and foliage samples to laboratories, and has the laboratory testing results showing high amounts. In fact, they are toxic levels of aluminum in the soils, and foods and foliage crops absorb that aluminum. Aluminum is a neurotoxin. Okay. Lynette is asking, are there any scientific documents published on this technology, or is it mainly theory? Lynette, there are only the scientific documents regarding the technology that I just described, and is in Entangled magazine about 3D haptic, that means touchable, haptic 3D. So the best thing to look for would be haptic, H-A-P-T-I-C, haptic holograms. Just type that in. Those are the solid holograms. The other part, in terms of Bluebeam itself, sorry about the noise in the background. The Bluebeam has been published as a HARP program, So look at Bluebeam HARP, HAARP, and you'll find that in terms of actual military papers that have been released publicly. And there are Air Force manuals that have been released publicly regarding Project Bluebeam. Okay? So it's not simply published stories, it's not mainly theory. This has come out of the military complex itself by way of technical manuals that have been published, and also many, many scientific papers regarding HARP. That's why I've included this in Covert Catastrophe, because it's taken right out of the scientific papers. Okay? Yes, this is for the purpose, Julie, of the second coming of Christ. Joel Rosenberg, GC2 Center, is asking. He's a Christian writer. I think you could relate to his vision of the future. I know of Joel Rosenberg very well. I've read several of his early books, in particular Epicenter regarding Jerusalem, and also the Copper Scrolls. I know he is a Messianic Jew. He's a Christian/Jew. And yes, I do know about Joel Rosenberg, very familiar with his works. I'm not endorsing his books, I'm not endorsing his work, I'm simply saying, GC, I am aware of Joel Rosenberg. Okay? Alrighty. Are there any videos on this tech being tested? I'm sure there are. I just don't have any of that right in front of me, but yes, I'm sure there are. Kathleen is saying that on Kindle, Project Bluebeam, The Quest for a New World Order and the Rule of the Antichrist Kindle edition is available. Okay? Project Bluebeam. She's put the link in the chat room. Okay. So again, Project Bluebeam is an Air Force program. Yes?
Rudolph just made an excellent comment. He said, the AC may be a hologram, the beast being the system, and the hologram the image of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see that.
I see it.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent.
Okay, I'll read that for the group. Rudolph in the chat room is saying the Antichrist may be a hologram, the beast being the system, and the hologram the image of the beast. Yep, very, very much could be. I would just kind of change it up a little bit, Rudolph, and say that the Antichrist, that is the spirit, indwells a human. So I wouldn't say the Antichrist is necessarily a hologram. However, he causes, the second beast causes the first beast, the image of the first beast, to be produced and to be worshipped and to perform miracles. Okay? So I would say the image of the beast is a hologram. The beast is the beast system. Yeah, I could go along with that. We have the false prophet, we have the Antichrist, and we have the first beast. Okay? Alrighty. Happy to take questions. I'm not going to go extensively into Bluebeam, except to say that this is a system that is involved with the HARP technology. HARP is a multi-million watt ground-based antenna system. It is a system that heats up the atmosphere. There are multiple HARP type ground-based systems around the world, not just in Gakona, Alaska, which I mentioned in Covert Catastrophe, and also in 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, Gakona, Alaska. But this is a high altitude auroral radio antenna system. It heats up the atmosphere, the ionosphere. You have the toposphere, you have the ionosphere. The ionosphere, it heats up a focused area in the ionosphere so that it is able to broadcast energy, and this is Tesla technology, broadcast energy, electromagnetic energy, through the atmosphere to over-the-horizon locations on the planet. This has also been attributed to the triggering of earthquakes. Again, Tesla technology, his earthquake machine. But it is an atmospheric heater. So it's modifying, talk about global warming, it's modifying the atmosphere. This ties in with Bluebeam. Bluebeam is the projection of photons and energy, electrons itself, electrons and photons into the atmosphere. So we have electrons from HAARP and we have photons from ground-based systems. In my book, we use the synchrotron to do that because part of what synchrotrons produce are hard X-rays, these are synchrotron energies, and gamma rays. And they can project these, they can direct these energies as well as accelerated particles and steer them. So if you want to read more about how they do that in this story, just read Covert Catastrophe. Okay, I won't read the rest of that tonight. But it is for the purpose of deceiving the world. And it's simple technology. They can do it from ground-based photon transmitters, lasers, and literally project these 3D images on the atmosphere. If you go through YouTube, you will see news footage in China of an entire city holographically projected. You can see other YouTube videos where they have projected on the side of buildings 3D images on the sides of buildings. Not just 2D. I mean, these are 3D. They are actually look like these are images that are alive that you can interact with. And again, in Entangled magazine, I've published the articles about haptic, H-A-P-T-I-C, holograms, solid holograms that you can touch. You can actually have holographic dials and buttons and keyboards that you can interact with, just like you see in the movies, okay? So you can adjust instruments holographically by just reaching out and turning the dial. Okay? Alrighty. Okay. I'm wondering where this conspiracy theory on Bluebeam being used to project a counterfeit alien invasion came from, where it got started. I would hate the world to be fooled, but that could be cool to see, Lynette is saying. Well, this is the lying signs and wonders. Part of the system of control through the scientific community has been floating this idea that we originated from ancestors. Lots of people want to talk about and publish about the Anunnaki. Okay, so if you want to look at that, the Anunnaki, the claim is the Anunnaki are our ancestors from the stars. And that's what I'm alluding to in Covert Catastrophe, okay? But in this case, they're holograms. They're solid holograms. And in the storyline, they actually go to the Masonic Temple at 1111 California Street. And I'm not making that up. Look it up. Google it. 1111 California Street is the Masonic Temple in downtown San Francisco on California Street. And that's in Covert Catastrophe. This is where these 10 holographic aliens, ancestors, depart the UFO and meet with the president and other representatives of humanity in the Masonic Temple. And you can understand why I put that in the story. when the president is speaking and addressing the world, he's standing in front of a pyramid, the Transamerica building in the financial district of San Francisco, right there next to California Street, next to the Masonic Temple. And over the president, I didn't read this from the book, but it's in Covert Catastrophe, is the debt clock. There is a world debt clock, digital numbers above his head as he stands at the podium, and he declares, when he pushes the button on the podium and stops the clock numbers from rotating, he declares a debt reset. And I wrote that in 2013, a debt reset. He zeroes out the debt clock, and the numbers having moved backwards to zero. So he declares in front of the Transamerica building, next to the Masonic Temple, a debt reset. So there's a lot in that book. I hope you guys enjoy reading it. Again, it was written to be converted, to be adapted into a screenplay, so it doesn't read real well, but at least the information's in there. I think 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, I think I got a little bit better in my writing skills and storytelling skills. That's where the quantum computers are really focused upon. And they are, the action takes place on the island of Cyprus, the Mount Olympus, the Isle of Patmos, and the 7 churches in what is modern day Turkey from Revelation are the locations of 7 individual quantum computers and one single controlling computer. They try to install on the island of Cyprus, okay, on top of the mountain. Anyway, that's a pretty fast-paced story, and we've got a submarine in there and all kinds of fun stuff. But we have 2 competing quantum computer systems, both of which are arranged in my 600-cell tetrahedron, which is my model of the universe. But it is also the model of a universal quantum computer. Okay? So, I hope that strikes up some interest to read the 2 books. They read pretty quickly, so shouldn't take you too long. Happy to take questions by emails. I think we'll wrap it up for this evening. Thank you for joining me on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Again, our schedule will be Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern from this point going forward. And those of you in the general public, we just encourage you to join us through Patreon. And you will have the magazine, you'll have the books, you'll have the access to all of the information put together in our archives for over 3 years. And all of that information is now coalescing into today's events. So we've talked about for 3 years in the Patreon community about everything that was coming. Now everything that we've talked about for 3 years is coming to a head. It is coalescing right now in the present day. So if you want to know how we got here, go back through Entangled magazine. That's the quickest way to do it. If you want to skim through 3 years worth of live streams that are all 2 hours apiece, they're organized in an outline provided by one of our patrons, Josh, who did a beautiful job doing that. If you would like to see what Entangled magazine looks like free of charge, the June edition and July edition of Entangled are both available for free. You can download them right off my homepage at anthonypatch.com. Feel free to distribute the June and July issues to anyone you care to. This month's issue is on the Seal of God. June's edition is on the mark of the beast. And yes, it includes the microneedle array discussion, but it is an outline, again, an outline that was provided by one of our patrons, Mary from Sweden, from Norway, put together a great outline on the mark of the beast, all the things that we've talked about in live streams and in the magazine into an outline form. And then I added some graphics and additional comments, but that comprises the June edition. This is why the Mark of the Beast in June and the Seal of God in July are freely available for anyone to download. Okay? All right. Let's see. Rudolph is asking, do you believe the so-called universe is contained within the firmament? Well, the firmament, we have the second heaven and the third heaven. So I kind of need a definition of the firmament as to how you define the firmament to answer that question. Yes, please like this live stream. Thank you, guys. You know, my YouTube channel has been demonetized for a long time now. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that we applied for reinstatement of monetization. We were eligible for that appeal, and I haven't heard one word from YouTube on my appeal, so we are still demonetized here on YouTube. But I thank you, we thank you, Kathleen and myself, so much for your patronage, for your support through Patreon. That's what makes all this possible, okay? So thank you very much. So until today's Tuesday, so we'll go to Thursday now, 7 o'clock. We'll get back together, Lord willing. And thank you very much for all of your prayers for our good friend Chris. We got the word yesterday that my best friend, who I worked with as a paramedic, his wife was tentatively diagnosed as having cancer, but she has been tested and is completely free and clear of all cancer. Thank you all for your prayers. And also Pam has had clear results on her cancer tests. Pam is now free at this point from cancer, and we attribute that to your prayers as well. We thank the Lord, thank the Holy Spirit, and thank God our Father for that healing of Pam and for Chris. So if you have prayer requests, please, we humbly ask you to send your prayer requests to us, and we will follow through on those prayers on your behalf. Okay? All right. Yes, thank you, Eileen. Thank you very much. That is great news. It is. And big shout out to Eileen. I won't say why. She knows why. Her husband knows why. But big shout out to Eileen. Thank you, and God bless you and your husband. It's wonderful. Okay, with a little bit different night tonight. I hope that was okay. And God bless you all. Thank you for your friendship and fellowship, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Good night.